The sharp tang of hay and leather drifted through the dawn air as Colin Rivers moved quietly down the long aisle of Starlight Riding Academy's main barn. Vermont sunlight filtered in through the open stable
I guess
doors,
trust only gets you so
turning
far.
dust motes into tiny
I
gold
trust you.
sparks. But the world beyond that archway might as well have been another planet.
It's your choice now.
Out there, students in navy blazers laughed as they led shining horses toward the show ring. In here, the only applause was the rhythmic scrape of Colin's pitchfork against old bedding. He worked fast, shoulders hunched, his uniform, faded jeans, a gray t-shirt, boots held together by hope, made him nearly invisible. That was how he wanted it. At 17, Colin knew how to blend into the background. He'd learned it the hard way. After the fall, after the accident that shattered not only his leg, but the future everyone thought he'd have. Some mornings, he caught his reflection in a stall window, the messy brown hair, the lean face with wary blue eyes, a limp he tried to hide. He'd once been a prodigy, a rising star in liberty riding, horse and human dancing together with no reins, no whip, just trust. Now he was a ghost in his own story, working off his family's debt, cleaning up after the rich kids who called Starlight their playground. Still, there was comfort in routine. The horses recognized him, at least. Even the difficult ones, especially them, seemed to sense something different in Colin. He moved quietly, never raising his voice, always letting them sniff his hand first. It wasn't long before he'd won over Midnight, the bay gelding who bit most people, and Dancer, the little gray mare who wouldn't stand for anyone else's touch. Colin's reward was a quiet snort, a soft nose pressed to his chest, the flick of an ear when they heard his footsteps. But people? He avoided them. Especially Sophia McIntyre, the Academy's star. Sophia was everything Colin wasn't. Wealthy, competitive, untouchable. She breezed through the barn like she owned it, her laughter high and cold. Her friends followed, their jokes and whispers trailing behind her like expensive perfume. Did you see him? That's the Rivers kid. Wasn't he famous before? What? The accident? They say he fell because his horse went crazy. Some say it was his fault. Colin heard it all, but he kept his eyes down. Hands busy, rumors had a way of growing at Starlight, fed by jealousy and boredom. He let them think what they wanted, as long as they left him alone. That morning, as the Academy buzzed with preparation for the big show, Colin was scrubbing buckets in the tack room when Liam, 12 years old, all freckles and big dreams, poked his head around the corner. "Hey, Colin, you want to see something cool?" Liam grinned, holding up a battered magazine. Horse and Rider, featuring Sophia on the cover. Colin smiled. "Not today, bud. I've got a mountain of stalls to finish before Mrs. Landry finds me standing still." Liam rolled his eyes, but he hung around, helping him stack clean saddle pads. "You ever gonna ride again? You used to be. You were really good." Colin hesitated, gaze slipping out the window to the distant ring where horses were warming up. "Maybe," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "But not here." Suddenly a crash echoed from the main arena, followed by frantic shouts. Colin's muscles tensed. Something's wrong. He dropped the bucket, instinct propelling him forward before his mind could catch up. Liam followed, sneakers slapping the concrete. They burst into the blinding sunlight, and the whole academy seemed frozen in place. At the far end of the ring, a chestnut stallion was rearing, wild-eyed, his rider clinging desperately to the saddle. The crowd, students, parents, instructors, stood at the rail, powerless. The horse's panic echoed off the rafters. hooves striking sparks off the boards. One wrong move, and the girl could be thrown. Colin recognized the horse at once, Valor, a prized show stallion with a reputation for unpredictability. Sophia's best friend, Piper, was the rider, terror on her face. "Do something!" someone screamed. The instructors fumbled with lunge lines, whistles, but the stallion only grew wilder. Sophia barked orders, her voice sharp with fear, but no one stepped into the ring. Colin's heart hammered. He saw the horse's whites of his eyes, the way Valor circled, seeking escape. There's too many people, too much noise. He's trapped. Without thinking, Colin vaulted the fence, pain flashing through his leg but ignored. The world shrank to the sand under his boots, the frantic stallion, the girl clinging for her life. "Easy," Colin breathed, holding out his hands, palms up, moving slow. Valor wheeled, ears flat. Colin didn't look at the girl. He didn't shout. He dropped his voice lower, gentler. "Hey, big guy, it's okay. You're not alone. Not today." He took a step, then another. The audience held its breath. Sophia's eyes narrowed. Was he showing off? The other students whispered, phones raised, filming. Valor's breathing slowed, nostrils flaring. He stopped, trembling. Colin inched closer, humming softly, an old lullaby his grandfather used to sing to frightened foals. "That's it. You're all right." With one more step, Colin was close enough to touch the horse's shoulder. He did. Just barely, then stroked Valor's neck, feeling the tremor fade. Piper slid off, collapsing in relief. The stallion lowered his head, letting Colin guide him with only a whisper and an open palm. The arena was silent. Only when the crisis passed did the spell break. Cheers, applause, angry shouts from the staff. Colin stepped back, vanishing again, but the moment hung in the air like electricity. He limped away before anyone could speak to him. But as he reached the barn, he caught a glimpse of Sophia's face, furious, suspicious, shaken, and above it all, the rumor mill spun faster than ever. The incident with Valor became the talk of Starlight before the sun set that same day. By dinner time, everyone from the youngest grooms to the board of directors had heard how the invisible stable boy had tamed the academy's most unpredictable stallion with nothing but a whisper and his hands. But for Colin Rivers, the attention felt like a spotlight he desperately wanted to dodge. He'd barely made it back to the barn before the flood started. Mr. Grady, the gruff but kind-eyed barn manager, met him at the feed room door, shaking his head in disbelief. "That was something, kid. You just saved Piper, and that horse, from a world of pain." Grady clapped a hand on Colin's shoulder, gentle but firm. The old man's praise warmed him, but the worry never left Colin's eyes. "Thanks, Mr. Grady, but I just did what anyone would do," Colin replied, voice quiet. "I didn't want trouble." "You don't always get to choose," Grady said, with a chuckle that softened the moment. "Trouble sometimes finds those with real courage." But trouble wasn't what Colin wanted. He tried to melt into the background as the barn buzzed with new energy. The other stable hands stared at him in awe. Even a few of the elite students eyed him with something like respect, though it was often tinged with curiosity and confusion. He heard the whispers as he swept out the tack room that night. "Did you see it?" He didn't even flinch. How did he learn that? Isn't he the kid who, fell? It was as if his past and present were colliding in a way he couldn't control. Rumors, already thick, twisted into new shapes. Some said he'd been hiding his talent on purpose. Others claimed he had some magical connection with horses. One theory was that he'd been kicked out of his last academy for something unspeakable. Colin ignored them all. He focused on the routine, mucking out stalls, washing hooves, checking water buckets. The horses were his only refuge, their quiet company a balm to his restless thoughts. But he couldn't escape the feeling that eyes were always on him now. The next morning, he arrived early, hoping for a few moments of peace. But as he crossed the yard, he saw a crowd gathered near the office. A monitor had been wheeled outside, and a shaky phone video was playing on repeat. The moment Colin stepped into the ring, the hush as he calmed Valor, the thunderous applause at the end. The footage had already gone viral. Hundreds of comments, shares, and even a few local news reporters circling the story. Colin froze, pulse thundering. He slipped around the crowd, ducking into the barn, but he couldn't outrun Sophia McIntyre. She stood in his path, arms crossed, her riding boots spotless, her long blonde hair pulled into a severe ponytail. A ring of her friends surrounded her, phones out, all eyes on Colin. "So what was that yesterday?" she demanded, lips curled in a half-smile. "Some kind of stunt to get noticed? Or were you just showing off for the cameras?" Colin met her gaze, steady but cautious. "I was just trying to help. Piper could have been hurt." "Oh, please." Sophia's laugh was cold. "Piper's fine and Valor's just dramatic. But you made sure everyone saw you, didn't you? Guess the stable rat wants to be famous." Her friends snickered, but there was a brittle edge to their laughter. Colin could feel the jealousy simmering beneath Sophia's perfect exterior. "I didn't do it for attention," Colin said, his voice flat. "I did it because no one else was doing anything." The horse was scared. Sophia's cheeks reddened, but she shrugged it off, turning to her friends. "Did you all get it on video?" "Good. The world needs to see what happens when amateurs play hero." But as she stalked away, someone else stepped forward. Liam, eyes wide with admiration. "That was awesome, Colin. You weren't scared at all." Colin managed a small smile. "I was terrified, Liam. But sometimes, you have to do the right thing, even when it's hard." He tried to shake it off, but the world outside wouldn't let him. By lunch, the academy's director called him into the main office, a place he'd only been summoned once after his accident. Mrs. Landry sat at her desk, her lips pursed, a stack of printed news articles in front of her. "You've caused quite a stir, Mr. Rivers," she said, tapping the pile. "The donors are calling, parents too. Some want to know how a stablehand got so close to a dangerous horse. Others are calling you a hero." Colin shifted, uncomfortable. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble. You may not have tried, but it found you," Mrs. Landry replied. "The academy values discipline and safety. You're not a student here anymore, Colin. You know the rules." He braced for the worst. A lecture, a threat, maybe even being fired. But instead she let out a long sigh. "Still, what you did took courage. The world's watching now. We'll be at reviewing your situation." Colin left the office with his heart pounding. Outside, Sophia and her friends watched him go, whispering and plotting. He could feel the storm building. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the barn settled into quiet, Colin slipped into the last stall, the one with the locked door and warning sign. Blaze, the academy's most feared stallion, untouched by anyone for months. Colin stood outside the bars, just watching the horse pace. He wondered if he could ever outrun his own legend, or if he'd always be the boy with a past. He reached a hand through the gate, whispering gently, "You're not alone, big guy." And in that silent barn, for a moment, both horse and boy seemed to understand each other perfectly. By the end of the week, Colin could barely walk down the barn aisle without heads turning or whispers following in his wake. Some staff patted him on the back, some students asked him questions about horses, and a few, especially Sophia, shot him icy looks as if he'd committed a personal crime by stepping into the spotlight, even for a moment. The viral video of him calming Valor was now everywhere. Commenters online called him a horse whisperer, and local news outlets clamored for interviews. Colin hated every second of it. He kept his head down, working through his chores, trying to ignore the new buzz of attention. But even as he scrubbed water buckets or swept the walkways, he could hear the rumors mutating. Some said he had used tricks or hypnosis. Others speculated about his old accident, and more than a few guessed he was angling for a comeback. The story had a life of its own, and Colin felt like a character trapped inside it. On Saturday morning, the pressure finally boiled over. The Academy's indoor arena was packed for the weekly Liberty riding demonstration, and Sophia was, of course, the star. Her friends lined the fence, cheering, phones at the ready. Even a few parents were there, standing with arms folded, sizing up the new prodigy everyone was talking about. Colin kept to the shadows, filling hay nets and watching the show from a distance. Sophia, in her tailored blue jacket, handled her black mare with crisp, almost mechanical perfection. The horse trotted, bowed, reared on cue. The applause was polite, but Sophia's smile never reached her eyes. When the exhibition ended, she strutted over to Colin, a small crowd trailing in her wake. Her boots crunched in the shavings. He straightened, bracing himself. "Enjoying the show?" she asked, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Colin shrugged. "You did great, Sophia." Her smile was thin. "Well, thank you. It's not every day we have an audience of internet celebrities in the barn. You must be really proud. Everyone talking about you, acting like you're some kind of hero." Colin flushed, glancing away. "I don't want attention. I was just doing my job. That's not what it looked like." Sophia's eyes flashed. "Some of us have worked for years to get where we are. You think you can just show up, pull a stunt, and what? Be the new golden boy? Let's see you prove it, stablehand." Her words echoed through the silent arena, drawing the attention of students and instructors alike. Colin tried to step around her, but Sophia moved to block him. "I'll make you a wager," she announced, loud enough for all to hear. "Liberty Showcase is in 3 weeks. You do a routine with Blaze. If you can get that monster to listen, perform a perfect Liberty round, then Starlight will open new scholarships and apprenticeships for underprivileged kids and stable hands. If you fail, you leave. For good." The barn was silent. Blaze? The stallion was infamous, untouched since his last handler had been thrown and hospitalized. The thought of Colin working with Blaze sent a chill down the aisle. Colin hesitated, pulse pounding. "It's not about me," he tried to say. "I don't want—" "Are you scared?" Sophia taunted, a sneer curling her lips. "Or maybe all those stories about you are just stories. Maybe you're not as special as everyone thinks." He could feel eyes boring into his back. Staff, students, even the Academy's director, who had wandered over at the commotion. Colin glanced at Liam, who stood with wide eyes at the end of the aisle, silent but hopeful. For a heartbeat, the barn was filled with every kid who had ever been overlooked or laughed at, every stable worker who dreamed of more, but never got the chance. Colin's jaw tightened. He looked Sophia in the eye. "Fine," he said. "If I win, the scholarships happen. If I lose, I'm gone. Sophia smirked, turning to the crowd. You all heard it! The hero's taking on Blaze! This'll be fun! The buzz exploded. Bets were whispered, instructors shook their heads, and even the more cynical staff watched with new curiosity. Colin felt like he'd just signed away his soul. That evening, after the last students left, Colin snuck into the far paddock, where Blaze paced alone, ears pinned and muscles tense. The stallion was breathtaking. A fiery red coat, black mane, and a scar across his chest from an old injury. Most saw a menace. Colin saw pain, fear, and misunderstood power. He stood at the fence, careful not to move too fast. Hey, big guy, just me. Blaze snorted, tossing his head, pawing at the earth. Colin took a slow breath. I'm not here to hurt you. I know what it's like to be pushed aside, to have everyone expect you to explode. He pulled a carrot from his pocket, holding it flat on his palm. Blaze hesitated, then stretched his neck, nostrils flaring, before snatching the treat and dancing away. Colin chuckled, relief and nerves mixing in his chest. He came back every night that week, after chores, after lights out, speaking softly, letting Blaze learn his scent, the rhythm of his footsteps. Progress was slow. Some nights Blaze would pin his ears and bare his teeth, refusing to come close. Other nights, he'd inch near, just to bolt away the second Colin reached out. Word spread through the staff. Colin Rivers was training with Blaze, but he wouldn't let anyone watch. Sophia and her friends tried to spy, giggling in the dark, but Grady chased them off with threats of extra chores. As the days passed, Colin started to see a flicker of trust in the stallion's eyes. He knew the real challenge wasn't just the horse. It was the pressure, the expectations, and his own fear of failing the kids who needed this chance. One night, after a breakthrough, a gentle nuzzle, the barest touch of nose to hand, Colin whispered into Blaze's ear. It's you and me now, boy. We're not just proving them wrong, we're showing them what's possible. In the silence of the barn, hope and dread warred inside him. For the first time since his accident, Colin felt something new burning in his chest. Determination. Training with Blaze became Colin's world. Every night, after the last light in the dorms flickered out, he crept through the dark stables with only a flashlight and his heartbeat for company. The stallion was always waiting, pacing restlessly at the far end of the paddock, as if he sensed that something different was coming, something that wasn't another battle of wills, but a search for understanding. Colin remembered his grandfather's words as he walked the length of the fence, never turning his back on Blaze, but never crowding him either. The old man had taught him that trust wasn't something you forced out of a horse. You invited it, slowly, patiently, until the horse chose to give it. Every step with Blaze was a test, and every test was a lesson in patience. He started small, spending long minutes just sitting by the paddock, talking softly about everything and nothing. Blaze watched, wary at first, but then curiosity got the better of him. After a few nights, the stallion would edge closer, ears flicking toward Colin's voice. One evening, as the Vermont sky shifted from indigo to black, Blaze stepped close enough to nuzzle Colin's shoulder, searching for a treat. Colin barely breathed, feeling the horse's warm breath and the rough velvet of his muzzle. In that quiet space, it almost felt like hope. But the barn was never truly quiet for long. During the day, Sophia and her friends made sure of that. They watched Colin with narrowed eyes, whispering and snickering as he swept the aisles or polished tack. Sometimes, as he passed, They'd make loud, pointed comments about charity cases and circus tricks. One afternoon, Colin returned to the paddock to find the gate left unlatched and a pile of unfamiliar objects, buckets, plastic bags, fluttering rags, scattered inside. Blaze snorted, spooked, refusing to come near for hours. Colin's frustration nearly boiled over. He paced outside the paddock, fists clenched. Every step forward seemed to be met with a new obstacle. Doubt gnawed at him. Maybe Sophia was right. Maybe he was just a stable hand who'd gotten lucky. A has-been trying to relive faded glory. It was Mr. Jackson, Grady, who found him that night, slumped against a fence post, staring at the ground. "You look like you've been kicked by a mule," Grady grumbled, lowering himself onto the rail beside Colin. "Blaze giving you trouble?" Colin shook his head. "It's not him. It's everything. Sophia and her friends, they're trying to mess with us. Sometimes I think I'm not good enough to do this." Grady grunted. "That's what they want you to think, son. You remember what your granddad used to say? You can't win a horse's trust by force. You win it by showing up every day, no matter what. That goes for people too. If you quit now, you're giving them exactly what they want." Colin took a deep breath, nodding. He owed it to Blaze, and to every kid at Starlight who'd ever been told they didn't belong, not to give up. There were bright moments, too. Liam, the youngest apprentice, was always there to help, carrying buckets and sneaking extra apples for Blaze. The boy's wide-eyed enthusiasm was a balm against the storm. "You're gonna win, Colin," he said one night, grinning as he watched Blaze follow Colin in slow, careful circles around the ring. "I just know it." Colin ruffled Liam's hair, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks, kid. I hope so." But the setbacks kept coming. One morning, Colin found a tack box smashed and his training line sliced clean through. Another day, someone accidentally left a radio blaring near the paddock, sending Blaze into a panic that took hours to calm. Sophia's friends always had excuses, but the smirk on her face made it clear who was behind it all. As the showcase drew closer, the pressure mounted. Word spread that donors would be attending, along with local press. If Colin failed, he wouldn't just lose his place at Starlight. He'd lose any hope of a future in the world he loved. Every mistake, every setback, felt heavier than the last. The night before the Liberty Showcase, disaster struck. Blaze was jittery, sweating, refusing to come near. Colin paced, whispering, trying every trick he knew, but the stallion stayed rooted at the far end of the paddock, eyes wide with fear. Colin's voice broke. "Please, come on, Blaze. I need you tonight." But Blaze turned away, and Colin felt his heart crack. He slumped to the ground, head in his hands. Maybe Sophia's right. Maybe I'm just chasing ghosts. He sat in the dark for a long time, fighting tears, the weight of failure pressing down like a physical thing. At last, footsteps crunched on the gravel, Liam holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Don't give up, Colin," the boy said, offering a mug with trembling hands. "You're the only one who ever believed in me. You gave Blaze a chance when everyone else gave up. You can't quit on him now." Colin managed a weak smile, taking the mug. "Thanks, Liam." They sat together in silence, stars spinning above the paddock. And slowly, the fear ebbed, replaced by a stubborn kind of hope. "Tomorrow," Colin whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "Tomorrow, we show them what trust looks like." And as the first light crept over the horizon, Blaze finally stepped close, resting his head on Colin's shoulder for a brief, perfect moment. an unspoken promise that neither would face the day alone. Sunrise arrived like a slow drumroll over Starlight Riding Academy, gilding the white fences and neat green lawns in gold. Colin barely slept. All night he'd replayed every moment with Blaze, every setback and small victory. His hands shook as he buttoned his only clean shirt and laced his scuffed boots, trying to ignore the feeling that today, everything would change, one way or another. By mid-morning, the academy had transformed into a festival ground. Colorful banners snapped in the wind, and crowds gathered along the main arena. Elegant women in wide-brimmed hats mingled with men in tailored suits, donors eager to see the show. News cameras jockeyed for position. The students wore their best jackets, and the stable hands hurried to make every stall shine. For once, everyone's eyes weren't on Sophia or the usual stars. They were waiting for Colin and Blaze. In the barn, Colin checked Blaze over with careful hands. The stallion's coat gleamed copper red, but his muscles trembled beneath the surface, eyes flicking toward every sudden noise. Colin spoke in a low, steady voice, offering bits of carrot. Feeling the horse's hot breath on his fingers. "Hey, boy. This is our moment. We don't have to be perfect, just honest. Whatever happens out there, you're not alone." Mr. Grady gave him a quiet nod, clapping his shoulder before leaving for the stands. Even Liam, dressed in borrowed khakis, pressed a lucky horseshoe into Colin's hand, eyes shining with hope. "You got this, Colin. Show them what real trust looks like." Colin grinned, heart pounding, and led Blaze out into the sunlight. The arena was buzzing. Sophia and her friends lounged by the rail, radiating confidence. She wore her winningest smile, and her mare stood polished to a mirror sheen. On the opposite side, instructors whispered, faces tense. Starlight's director sat front and center, donors flanking her, notebook open on her lap. When Colin and Blaze entered, a hush fell. Some of the crowd craned their necks, hoping for drama. Others, like Liam and Grady, sat on the edge of their seats, silent prayers on their lips. Colin removed Blaze's halter and lead, letting the stallion stand free in the wide ring. There were no reins, no whip, just Colin, a boy with nothing to lose, and Blaze, a horse most had given up on. He began with the basics, using body language and a soft, rhythmic whistle to ask Blaze to walk beside him. At first it went well. The stallion kept his head low, ears flicking toward Colin's voice. They circled, changed direction, stopped, and started. The crowd murmured, surprised by how the feared horse responded. Then the pressure mounted. A camera flash popped in the stands. Blaze snorted, sidestepping nervously. Sophia's mare let out a shrill whinny from the rail, and Blaze balked, tossing his head. Colin could feel the atmosphere change, whispers rippling, Sophia's friends exchanging smug looks. "It's okay," Colin murmured, holding his ground. "I'm right here." Blaze darted away, refusing to rejoin the circle. For a moment, panic clutched Colin's heart. He felt the weight of every person watching, every story whispered about him, every kid counting on this moment. The noise of the crowd swelled, a tide threatening to sweep him under. Sophia smirked, voice cutting through the tension. "I guess trust only gets you so far." The judges exchanged looks. Starlight's director frowned, pencil poised above her notes. Colin took a breath, forcing himself to slow down. He remembered his grandfather's voice. Sometimes you have to step back and let the horse come to you. Don't command. Invite. Don't demand. Trust. He knelt in the sand, lowering himself until he was small, unthreatening. The arena, for a moment, faded away. All that existed was Colin and Blaze, heart to heart. The memory of long nights in the paddock whispered hopes in the dark. Blaze watched him, muscles quivering, tail lashing nervously. The crowd murmured, restless. A judge coughed. Sophia's friends laughed quietly. Colin closed his eyes, breathing deeply, offering a space of calm in the middle of chaos. "Hey, boy," he whispered, so softly only Blaze could hear. "I trust you. It's your choice now." Time seemed to slow. Blaze pawed the sand, uncertain. The crowd leaned forward. The director's pencil hovered in the air. Then, with a trembling breath, Blaze stepped toward Colin. The stallion circled, still wary, but inch by inch, he drew closer, nostrils flaring. Colin kept still, offering his open palms, inviting, not demanding, partnership. At last, Blaze lowered his great head, pressing his nose to Colin's shoulder. The crowd gasped. Colin rose slowly, careful not to startle the horse, and Blaze followed, shadowing his steps. Together they moved through a series of gentle figures, walking, trotting, even a brief canter. Blaze choosing to stay at Colin's side, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. When Colin stopped, Blaze stopped. When Colin bowed, Blaze mirrored him, dipping his head almost to the ground, but the real test was yet to come. Colin took a deep breath and knelt again, this time waiting in total silence. For a moment, Blaze only stood, sides heaving. The arena was so quiet, Colin could hear his own heartbeat. Then, slowly, impossibly, Blaze bent his knees and sank down beside Colin, kneeling in the sand, shoulder to shoulder. The crowd erupted, a roar of applause, cheers, and even a few tears. Sophia stood frozen, face pale, mouth open in disbelief. The moment was captured from a dozen angles, phones flashing, reporters scribbling, parents hugging their children. For those few seconds, everything else melted away. There was only trust and the courage to let go. Colin rose, wrapping his arms around Blaze's neck, laughing through tears. They'd done it. Not by force, not by fear, but by partnership. And the world, watching through a million screens, would never see horsemanship the same way again. Colin's heart hammered in his chest, louder than the cheers erupting all around the arena. He knelt in the soft sand, Blaze beside him, shoulder to shoulder, both breathing hard. Cameras flashed, immortalizing the moment. He felt a hand on Blaze's shoulder and realized it was his own, steady and grateful, as the stallion's muscles trembled from effort, but not from fear. In that breathless instant, nothing else mattered. No rumors, no doubts, not even the pain in his own leg. There was just the wild, impossible truth. Blaze, the Academy's untouchable, had chosen him. For a few seconds, time seemed to freeze. The crowd didn't know whether to clap or cry. Even Mrs. Landry, the director, dropped her pen, eyes shining. Liam was screaming himself hoarse in the stands, jumping up and down as if he'd just watched a miracle. When Colin finally stood, Blaze did too, shaking the sand from his coat and tossing his mane as if announcing to the world that he'd made his choice. And he stood by it. Colin bowed his head, hand on his heart, a silent thank you to the horse, to his grandfather, to the second chance he never thought he'd have. Reporters surged toward the fence, shouting questions, waving their cameras. The donors stood, some clapping, some whispering to their neighbors. All at once, the ring was full of noise, applause, laughter, the low hum of disbelief. Sophia stood rooted by the rail, her face pale, lips pressed tight. Her friends looked from her to Colin, suddenly unsure, the familiar certainty in their world shaken. Colin led Blaze out of the arena to the barn, the crowd parting before him. He wanted nothing more than to disappear, to melt back into the quiet shadows where horses, not people, offered their judgments. But there was no hiding now. Everywhere he turned, someone wanted a word. Congratulations, praise, even apology. Mr. Grady caught him outside Blaze's stall, grinning from ear to ear. "Well, I'll be damned, kid. You just changed this place forever. You made 'em all see." Colin ducked his head, embarrassment prickling his skin. "I just trusted him, that's all." Blaze did the rest. Grady shook his head, clapping him on the back. "Not many can do what you did. You showed them something real." Colin was barely inside before Liam burst in, nearly tripping over his own excitement. "You did it! You really did it! Did you see everyone's faces? Blaze was amazing!" Colin managed a tired laugh. "Yeah, buddy. I saw. We both did." That night, as the Academy's gala dinner began, a video of Blaze kneeling beside Colin was already spreading online. Hundreds of thousands watched, then millions. People argued in comment threads and group chats. Some called it luck, some called it genius, but most called it something new, something honest. A famous trainer in Texas reposted the video. "This is horsemanship. No force, no fear, just trust." Within hours, Colin's inbox was full. Offers from riding schools, invitations to clinics, even a few sponsorship proposals. It felt like the whole world wanted a piece of him now. But at Starlight, the mood had shifted in a deeper way. During the gala, donors pressed Mrs. Landry for answers. Was she really going to honor the wager? Would the Academy finally open its doors to kids like Colin and Liam? Kids who didn't have rich parents or show ribbons, but who had grit, patience, and heart. Sophia tried to recover her poise, but the loss stung. For the first time, her friends didn't rally to her side. Some whispered about the scholarships. Others glanced at Colin, envy and something like respect mingling in their eyes. After the dinner, Mrs. Landry found Colin cleaning tack in the corner, as if nothing had changed. "Colin," she began, her voice gentle. "The board and I. Well, we have a lot to discuss. Your wager wasn't official policy, but the whole world saw what you did out there. The pressure's on." Colin set down the saddle soap, facing her. "I didn't do it for attention. If you want to punish me, fine. But don't punish the kids who never got a chance. Open the scholarships. Give the apprenticeships. Let them show what they can do." Mrs. Landry looked at him for a long moment, something softening in her eyes. "You have more influence here than you realize, Colin. Let's talk in the morning." Exhausted, Colin slipped away to the paddock. He found Blaze waiting by the fence, bathed in the silver light of a full moon. The stallion nickered, bumping Colin's chest with his head. A simple gesture, but it meant everything. "You're free, buddy," Colin whispered, voice raw with relief. "No more proving anything. You just get to be a horse now." He stood there in the quiet, moonlight on his face, listening to the hum of crickets and the distant sound of laughter from the gala. For the first time in years, Colin didn't feel invisible or broken. He felt right. The next day, news crews arrived. Blaze's story was everywhere, sparking debate about what it meant to truly understand a horse. Horsemanship clinics called, begging Colin to visit. Other schools wrote to Starlight, asking for advice for a piece of the magic. But Colin stayed humble. When a TV crew cornered him in the barn, he just shrugged, glancing toward Blaze. "It wasn't me," he said quietly. "It was trust. Blaze chose me because I gave him a choice." Sophia, for once, had no words. She watched from a distance, her own certainty shaken. Around her, the Academy's staff and students looked at Colin not as a stable hand, but as someone who had redefined what was possible. And everywhere he went, Colin carried that memory. The kneeling horse, the world watching, and the knowledge that real change started with a single act of trust. By sunrise the next morning, the world had already changed. Colin's phone, which rarely buzzed except for reminders from the feed store or a quick "good job" from Mr. Grady, was now vibrating with calls, texts, and a mountain of notifications. News crews were already outside Starlight's gates, their vans clogging the driveway. Local papers called him the Horse Listener. Horsemanship blogs debated his methods. Old friends from faraway towns sent messages of awe and disbelief. But the overnight fame sat on Colin's shoulders like an awkward new saddle. He moved through the barn as always, quiet, steady, focused on the horses, not the people. He checked on Blaze, who seemed completely unaware of his newfound celebrity. The stallion nuzzled Colin's shoulder, eyes soft, as if to say, "None of that matters here." By mid-morning, Mrs. Landry asked to see him in her office. She looked more tired than usual, her desk piled high with donor emails and newspaper clippings. "Colin," she began, "you've brought a lot of attention, good and bad, to Starlight. The board's been meeting since dawn. The donors are divided. Some are excited, some are concerned." Colin nodded, nerves taut as wire. "I'm not here for fame, Mrs. Landry. I just wanted a fair shot for kids like me. That was the deal." She pursed her lips, watching him over her glasses. "You know, the easy thing would be to give you a full scholarship and make you our star student. You'd be set, your future paid for, top horses, everything you wanted." Colin shook his head. "That's not what I want, ma'am." Mrs. Landry leaned forward. "You're turning down the offer? That's surprising." Colin looked out the window, watching Liam and a few apprentices playing with a rescued pony in the paddock. "If this is just about me, nothing changes for anyone else. I want something better." He took a breath, heart pounding. Open up scholarships for low-income kids. Make apprenticeships for the barn staff so they can learn real horsemanship, not just chores. And let the students, any student, work with elite horses if they earn the trust. Not just the rich ones. For a long moment, Mrs. Landry said nothing. The clock on her wall ticked off the seconds. At last she nodded, a hint of a smile softening her stern features. "You drive a hard bargain, Colin Rivers. But maybe it's time Starlight became something new. I'll take your proposal to the board. No promises, but I think the world is on your side right now." Relief and disbelief crashed through him in equal measure. That afternoon, Grady gathered the staff. With Colin at his side, he announced that Starlight would host its first free clinic, open to local kids, especially those who'd never been on a horse before. Liam bounced on his toes, eyes shining. "Can I help, Colin? I want to teach the little ones how to hold a lead rope." "You'll be in charge of the whole barn, buddy," Colin laughed, ruffling Liam's hair. Word spread quickly. Applications poured in from nearby towns. Some of the elite students scoffed, muttering about charity cases. But a few, after watching Colin and Blaze, started to help. They gave lessons, polished tack, taught kids how to curry a muddy pony. For the first time, the barn felt open, alive with new voices. Blaze became a living legend. Kids begged to touch his mane, to take photos with him. Even the most nervous beginners found confidence under his watchful gaze. And Colin, always in the background, guided them with the same patience he'd shown Blaze. Sophia watched the changes with a mixture of resentment and confusion. She tried to gather her friends, to mock the new starlight, but their laughter felt hollow. Some of her inner circle drifted away, drawn to the excitement and purpose sweeping the academy. One day, Sophia cornered Colin by the paddock, her voice quieter than usual. "Why didn't you just take the scholarship and run? You could have left us all behind." Colin studied her, searching for the right words. "Because if I did, nothing would change. Maybe you'd win your trophies, but you'd always wonder if you deserved them. Now you'll have to earn them, for real." For the first time, Sophia didn't have a quick comeback. She just nodded, eyes clouded with something like regret. In the weeks that followed, Colin worked with Grady and Mrs. Landry to organize the new programs. He built lesson plans, taught the apprentices, and quietly mentored the staff who wanted to learn more. He turned down offers for TV appearances and magazine interviews, sending polite notes instead. "Thank you, but I'm not interested in fame." The work speaks for itself. The changes sparked rumors across the riding world. Other academies called, wanting advice on scholarships and open barns. Starlight's culture began to shift. Rivalries turned into new friendships. Even Sophia, after a time, showed up to volunteer at the clinic, silent at first, but eventually helping a timid girl take her first steps in the ring. Late one evening, after the last student had gone home, Grady found Colin in Blaze's stall, quietly currying the stallion's neck. "You sure about all this, son?" he asked, his voice gentle. "You could be the next big thing. Fame, money, all of it." Colin smiled, resting his head against Blaze's shoulder. "I don't need a spotlight, Grady. I just want every kid, every horse to know they belong. That's enough for me." Outside, the barn lights glowed warm against the darkening sky. In that golden hush, Colin knew he'd made the right choice, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't matter. He closed his eyes, listening to the steady breath of the horse beside him, and let hope settle in his heart like a promise. This is just the beginning. The change at Starlight Riding Academy began as a ripple and quickly grew into a wave that rolled far beyond Vermont's borders. Within a month, the story of the Liberty Showcase and the kneeling horse had been replayed across the country, first as a viral sensation, then as a quiet revolution. Other riding schools and clubs started reaching out, not to Sophia or even to Mrs. Landry, but to Colin. He never expected to become the name behind a movement, but his phone and email filled with requests. Directors from established academies, struggling farm programs, and city stables all wanted to know, how do you teach trust? How do you build partnership without money, privilege, or force? Colin answered every message, no matter how late the hour, always in the same humble tone. You start by listening, not commanding. You invite, not order. You build a team, not a hierarchy. Back at Starlight, the new programs were thriving. The barn that had once echoed with whispers and rivalry now bustled with laughter, questions, and the kind of teamwork that couldn't be bought. Each weekend, the clinic filled with children, some from neighboring farms, others from inner-city schools, most of them touching a horse for the first time in their lives. Blaze became a symbol. His stall was decorated with handmade cards and photos from young riders who had found courage in his story. Kids lined up to feed him carrots. Parents snapped photos from the rails, and the staff started calling him Hope in Hooves. Colin found his days busier than ever, teaching, mentoring, organizing, and sometimes just listening to the worries and dreams of kids who, only weeks before, would have felt invisible at Starlight. Liam, who had once swept aisles in silence, now led whole groups through grooming and tacking lessons, his smile as bright as the morning sun. Not everyone embraced the changes overnight. Some of the elite students felt threatened, bristling at the thought of sharing the arena with newcomers. A few parents questioned the academy's future. Would standards drop? Would donors leave? But for every doubter, there were two new allies. Mothers whose children returned home bursting with confidence. Dads who saw their shy kids stand taller. Teachers who noticed new focus in their students. The camaraderie caught on. Soon, Colin received a letter from a riding center in Texas, asking if he'd consult on starting a scholarship program. Another arrived from California, inviting him to speak at a horsemanship conference. Colin hesitated. Public speaking wasn't his strength, but Grady encouraged him. "People listen to you because you walk the walk," the old horseman said, handing Colin a plane ticket with a wink. "Go on, son. Help them see what's possible." So Colin went. He spoke quietly, with humility, sharing stories of Blaze and the kids who'd come alive at Starlight. His honesty won people over more than any flashy performance could have. He taught small clinics, worked alongside nervous students and stubborn ponies, and always ended each visit the same way, reminding everyone that real horsemanship starts with respect, not ribbons. Back home, the academy continued to change. New friendships sprang up between students who, a month before, would have ignored each other. Rivalries gave way to healthy competition and mutual encouragement. Apprenticeships for staff members brought new energy to the barn, as workers who had once only mucked stalls now handled elite horses and even rode in lessons. One afternoon, Colin watched as Maria, who'd cleaned stalls for years, taught a group of kids to lunge a pony, her laughter ringing out across the ring. The staff began to notice a subtle shift. Horses that had been difficult or nervous grew calmer as they were handled by a wider variety of people. People who approached with patience instead of demands. The new culture was contagious. Older students helped younger ones, and, under Colin's guidance, the whole academy began to feel less like a competition and more like a family. Sophia kept her distance at first, her pride bruised by defeat and change. But even she was drawn in by the new energy. She found herself volunteering for the weekend clinics, quietly helping a group of anxious girls through their first riding lesson. At first, her presence was stiff. She corrected posture and pointed out mistakes with her usual bluntness. But as the weeks passed, she softened, her sharp edges worn smooth by the gratitude of the kids and the teamwork of her fellow students. One rainy Saturday, as the clinic wrapped up and the kids ran to their parents with muddy boots and bright smiles, Sophia lingered by Blaze's stall. Colin found her there, brushing the stallion's mane in silence. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think winning meant being the best. Now, I'm not so sure. Maybe it's about making everyone better." Colin smiled, recognizing a new humility in her voice. "That's what I've been trying to say," he replied. "We all rise together." As news of Starlight's transformation spread, copycat programs popped up all over the country. Camaraderie clinics appeared in farm newsletters. Horsemanship magazines published stories about the barn that changed everything. Even big-name trainers began opening their doors, offering new chances to kids who'd never dreamed of riding before. Colin watched it all unfold from the background, never seeking credit. When journalists called, he praised his mentors, the staff, the horses, and especially the kids. Blaze remained his loyal partner, never letting the fame go to his head. One afternoon, as the sun set and the barn glowed golden, Liam tugged on Colin's sleeve. "You think it'll last?" he asked. Colin squeezed his shoulder, eyes crinkling with a quiet smile. "If we keep showing up for each other, yeah, I think it just might." And in that moment, surrounded by laughter, the soft nickers of horses, and the friendships he'd helped spark, Colin finally let himself believe that true change was possible. One act of kindness, one day, one barn at a time. 1 year later, Starlight Riding Academy was unrecognizable, at least to anyone who hadn't witnessed its transformation. Gone were the invisible boundaries separating rich and poor, elite and apprentice, prodigy and stablehand. In their place, a new kind of energy flowed through the paddocks and barn aisles, one built on inclusion, respect, and the quiet, contagious power of second chances. The Liberty Showcase had become an annual event now, bigger and brighter, but different at its core. Instead of a single star rider or horse, the focus was on partnership, creativity, and the stories behind each routine. Kids from across Vermont and neighboring states traveled to Starlight, some for scholarships, others just for the chance to belong. On the morning of the anniversary, Colin stood by the rail and watched the new generation warm up. There was laughter, not nervous silence in the air. The ring was dotted with kids of every background, each paired with a horse that matched their spirit, sometimes wild, sometimes shy, always chosen for partnership, not pedigree. Liam, now a confident 14-year-old, trotted into the ring on a sturdy bay gelding, posture proud, eyes fixed on the horizon. He'd worked his way from apprentice to one of the top students, impressing everyone with his feel for the horses and his quiet leadership. As he guided his horse into a flawless Liberty circle, the crowd broke into applause. Liam glanced up at Colin in the stands, grinning with pride. The moment meant more to Colin than any blue ribbon ever could. After the event, the Academy's lawn filled with families, volunteers, and old friends. A makeshift stage had been set up beneath a canopy of oak trees. Mrs. Landry took the mic and, with a warm smile, welcomed the crowd. "A year ago," she began, "we watched a boy and a horse kneel together in this very ring, and nothing's been the same since. Starlight has become a place where everyone's welcome, where anyone can become more than they dreamed." Colin shifted in the crowd, uncomfortable with the attention. He preferred the shadows, where he could watch others grow without feeling the glare of the spotlight. But as he looked around, at Blaze, napping in the shade, at Grady, teaching a knot-tying clinic, at Liam, sharing a sandwich with a younger student, he realized something profound. The real legacy wasn't about what he'd done, but what he'd inspired in others. He found a quiet moment by the fence, reflecting on the year gone by. The lessons he'd learned from horses had shaped his approach to life: patience, empathy, the courage to invite rather than command. He remembered his grandfather's advice: greatness isn't measured by how many trophies you win, but by how many doors you open for others. The transformation wasn't easy. There had been pushback, especially in the early days. Some families withdrew their children, fearing that standards would slip. A few sponsors pulled their funding, but others stepped up. Inspired by the positive press and the real, visible change in Starlight's culture. Even Sophia's journey had been remarkable. After her defeat at the showcase, she struggled with resentment and shame. For a time, she retreated from the arena, unsure where she fit in a world where the rules had changed. But humility, once forced upon her, became a choice. She apologized publicly to Colin at the Academy's spring banquet, voice trembling but honest. "You showed me that real winning is about lifting others up, not just standing alone on a podium," she'd said. And from that day, she became one of the most devoted volunteers, helping run clinics and supporting the new scholarship students. With Sophia's help, the Academy started outreach programs, bringing horses to community centers and underfunded schools. Blaze, with his calming presence, became the centerpiece of these visits, patiently allowing hundreds of children to pet his nose, braid his mane, and learn the basics of horsemanship. Many who met Blaze went on to join the Academy, discovering confidence, friendship, and a sense of belonging they'd never known. Colin's own role at Starlight shifted too. No longer just a stable hand or a quiet miracle worker, he became a mentor, confidant, and quiet force behind the scenes. He trained staff and students alike, not for the spotlight, but for those ordinary moments when patience, kindness, and faith could change a day or a life. Sometimes, when he walked the barn at dusk, he found himself surrounded by new stories. A shy boy guiding a nervous pony for the first time, a girl with a stutter telling her horse secrets, a group of students laughing as they mucked stalls together. Each story, he realized, was a new thread in the tapestry he'd helped weave. The Academy's walls now showcased photos and letters from past and present students, many of whom had gone on to do great things, some as riders, others as trainers, a few as community leaders, and one as a veterinarian determined to serve rural barns for kids and horses alike. The lessons learned at Starlight rippled outward, carried by each child who'd found their voice in the ring or at a horse's side. As the sun dipped low, Liam found Colin by the fence, 2 sodas in hand. "You ever miss the old days?" Liam asked, a smile teasing his lips. Colin shook his head, laughing softly. "Not for a second. Look at all this." Liam nodded, watching the laughter and chaos on the lawn. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. None of us would." Colin looked at the boy, feeling the weight of gratitude and pride. "You're here because you worked for it, Liam. I just opened a door." Liam grinned, bumping Colin's shoulder. "Well, I'm going to hold that door open for the next kid." Colin smiled, feeling the truth settle in his chest. A legacy wasn't built by standing at the front, but by making sure there was always room for one more, and then stepping back to let them shine. As the Academy glowed under strings of lights and the sound of music drifted into the night, Colin knew, deep down, that greatness was never about glory. It was about the lives touched, the doors opened, and the hope left behind long after the spotlight faded. The golden haze of late summer wrapped itself around Starlight Riding Academy, and everywhere Colin looked, he saw reminders of change. Kids leading ponies with confidence, apprentices laughing as they cleaned tack, parents sipping coffee and swapping stories in the shade. The barns rang with cheerful voices, the fields dotted with riders of every age and background. It had been a year of transformation, and now, as the sun set on another day, Colin knew it was time for him to take his next step. He packed his things quietly one morning, rolling his few belongings. Old jeans, worn boots, his grandfather's weathered notebook, into a duffel. The rest he left behind. The pictures of Blaze and Liam tacked to his wall, the battered feed bucket with his name in faded marker, the lucky horseshoe that had once belonged to a little boy with big dreams. Grady found him in the tack room, tightening the straps on his bag. The old horseman didn't need to ask. He could see the decision in Colin's eyes. So, you're really leaving us, kid? Grady's voice was gruff, but his hand was gentle on Colin's shoulder. I think it's time, Colin replied, managing a crooked smile. There are other barns, other kids who need a chance. Starlight's in good hands. Grady nodded, swallowing hard. You did more than change this place, son. You changed people. And you taught me a thing or two about listening. They walked together out to Blaze's paddock, where the stallion grazed contentedly in the long grass. Blaze raised his head, recognizing Colin, and trotted over, nudging his chest with a familiar affection. Hey, boy, you take care of them, okay? There'll be new kids who need you. Colin spent a few quiet moments with Blaze, pressing his forehead to the horse's warm neck. Memories flooded back, of fear and hope, of lonely nights and moments of impossible trust. He felt the weight of what they'd built together, not just at Starlight, but in every heart and hoofprint the two had touched. Liam ran up, out of breath, eyes wide as he realized what was happening. You're leaving? But who'll teach the new kids? Who'll tell the stories? Colin knelt, hands on Liam's shoulders. That's your job now. You and all the others. You know what to do. Help the ones who feel invisible. Give them a chance. Liam blinked back tears, but nodded fiercely. I promise. The academy gathered for a farewell breakfast. Students, staff, and families filled the picnic tables, some still in boots and breeches, others in pajamas. Mrs. Landry made a short, emotional speech, praising Colin's courage and humility. Sophia gave him a hug, awkward but genuine. Thank you, Colin, for everything. I'm still learning, but I'll keep trying. He grinned. That's all any of us can do. Before he left, Colin led Blaze into the ring for one final circle. No audience, no cameras, just the two of them, moving together in silence. At the end, he knelt in the soft sand. Blaze, without hesitation, knelt beside him. Colin wrapped his arms around the stallion's neck, the memory of that first showcase alive in the quiet. He slipped away as the sun rose, walking down the driveway, bag slung over his shoulder. He paused at the gate, looking back one last time. The barns glowed in the golden light, full of laughter and life. Starlight wasn't perfect, but it was open and alive, a place where kindness and courage had become the new currency. Colin's journey took him far from Vermont, across state lines, to small farms and forgotten stables, to city riding schools where horses were more myth than memory. He offered what he'd learned: patience, invitation, trust. At every stop, he listened first, hearing the hopes and fears of riders and horses alike. He never forced his way in, never tried to be a hero. He simply showed up, shared a quiet moment, left a little more hope than he found. Some places he stayed for a week, others for a season. He helped a shy girl find her voice with a stubborn pony. He showed a struggling family how to teach their Mustang to trust again. He trained volunteers at a barn for children with disabilities, teaching them to kneel in the sand and wait for the horse's choice. Each goodbye was bittersweet, but Colin never lingered. He knew that real change happened when people claimed their own victories. Occasionally, news of his visits would reach Starlight. Letters arrived, sometimes with photos, sometimes with stories. Blaze remained the Academy's gentle giant, still inspiring new students. Liam rose to lead the apprentices, teaching with the same humility he'd learned from Colin. Sophia, now a mentor herself, helped guide scholarship students, always remembering the boy who changed everything by stepping into the ring when no one else would. The lesson of Colin's journey spread far beyond any one barn. Give trust, get trust, became a motto at stables across the country. Clinics and riding schools opened their doors, scholarships multiplied, and, everywhere, kids who once felt invisible found a way forward. Trainers began to look for the quiet leaders, the ones who listened, who invited, who knew that greatness was found in partnership, not domination. One autumn evening, as Colin walked the edge of a dusty Texas field, a little girl ran up to him, a paint pony in tow. "Are you the horse whisperer?" she asked, eyes wide with wonder. Colin smiled, kneeling to meet her gaze. "No, I'm just someone who believes in giving chances. Want to try?" She nodded, and together they showed the pony how to circle, how to pause and listen, how to build something that would last. As the sun set, Colin felt the same old peace settle in his heart, a certainty that the quiet power of kindness, offered and accepted, would ripple through barns and backyards, through city streets and country lanes, for years to come. Because true greatness isn't measured by medals or money, but by the opportunities you create, the courage you inspire, and the hope you leave behind. And sometimes, the greatest leaders are the ones who walk away quietly, trusting others to carry the light. Starlight faded in the distance, but wherever a child and a horse found each other in trust and hope, a little of Colin's legacy lived on, gentle, enduring, and strong as the bond that began it all.